The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harrison slammed his gavel. "Remove this woman immediately," he barked. Selena Monroe rose calmly, straightening her impeccable suit. "Before security arrives," she said softly, sliding her CIA credentials across the bench, "perhaps you should know who you're really expelling. Before we dive into this shocking confrontation, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to witness how this powerful black woman turns the tables on a corrupt system. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments as we explore what happens when prejudice meets someone with the power to fight back. Selena Monroe woke at exactly 5:30 that morning, the same way she had for the past 15 years working at the CIA. Her apartment in Alexandria was quiet morning light just beginning to filter through the blinds as she performed her daily ritual of checking security protocols before even brushing her teeth. This day was different, though. Today, she wasn't heading to Langley for her role as the CIA's chief legal counsel. Today, she was taking her first personal day in 3 years to appear as a character witness for Marcus Johnson, her childhood friend from Southside Baltimore. Selena stood under the shower, letting the hot water cascade over her shoulders as she recalled their childhood promise made 30 years ago under the big oak tree at Franklin Square Park. "We protect each other." Always they had sworn, hands clasped together after Marcus had stood up to neighborhood bullies, harassing Selena for talking white because she loved to read. Now Marcus needed her more than ever, facing fabricated drug possession charges that could destroy everything he had built as the director of the East Baltimore Community Center. The center had become a beacon of hope, offering everything from after-school programs to voter registration drives in a neighborhood systematically ignored by city officials. Selena knew the charges were suspicious. The moment Marcus called her 3 weeks ago, his voice strained as he explained how police allegedly found cocaine in his office during a surprise inspection. Marcus, who had never even smoked a cigarette in his life, who counseled kids about staying clean. The case stank of corruption, but Selena had to be careful. Her position at the CIA required discretion. She couldn't simply walk in as the agency's top lawyer and throw her weight around, which is why she deliberately chose a navy pantsuit that was professional but understated, not the designer outfits she wore to high-level briefings. As she applied minimal makeup, her secure phone buzzed. "Monroe," she answered crisply. "Selena, it's Director Phillips. I know you're taking personal time today, but I wanted to remind you about tomorrow's classified briefing with JSOC. The situation in the Balkan corridor is heating up." CIA Director Catherine Phillips was one of the few people who had supported Selena's rise through the ranks, appreciating her brilliant legal mind and unwavering ethics. "I'll be there, Director." 0800, correct affirmative. And Selena Phillips paused. "Whatever you're doing today, remember operational security protocols." The slight emphasis told Selena that Phillips knew exactly where she was going. Always, Director. The drive to the Baltimore City Courthouse took 40 minutes, giving Selena time to mentally prepare. She had researched Judge Everett Harrison extensively, discovering a troubling pattern of harsh sentences for minorities and lenient treatment for white defendants. His appointment during the previous administration had been controversial, but ultimately pushed through by Senator Maxwell Stone, a politician known for his tough-on-crime rhetoric that disproportionately targeted black communities. The discrimination began the moment Selena entered the courthouse. While white attorneys walked through security with a cursory wand wave, the guard made Selena empty her purse, completely questioned her about her laptop despite her showing her bar association card, and patted her down while white women behind her were waved through. At the clerk's desk, the middle-aged white woman barely looked up. "Defendant check-in is down the hall," she said flatly. "I'm not a defendant." "I'm here as a character witness for the Johnson case," Selena replied evenly, maintaining her composure despite the familiar sting of assumption. The woman finally looked up, skepticism evident before reluctantly directing Selena to courtroom 3B. In the hallway, Selena overheard 2 court officers talking. "Harrison's on the bench today." "Another good day coming," one said with a chuckle. "Yeah, he knows how to handle those people," the other replied. "Keeps the old school alive." Selena slowed her pace, committing their badge numbers to memory. As she waited outside the courtroom, she watched Judge Harrison handle the case before Marcus's détasse. A young white man charged with possession of heroin with intent to distribute was given a sympathetic hearing. Given your excellent family background and the fact that this appears to be an isolated incident, I'm sentencing you to 12 months probation and community service, Harrison announced benevolently. The defendant, the son of a prominent local businessman, according to the case introduction, walked out with a relieved smile. Selena felt her stomach tighten as the bailiff called out, "Case number 87654, State versus Marcus Johnson." Taking a deep breath, she entered the courtroom, her face a mask of professional neutrality, despite the growing sense of unease crawling up her spine. Judge Everett Harrison entered courtroom 3B with the confidence of a man who had never been questioned. At 68, his silver hair and perpetual scowl had become legendary in Baltimore's judicial system. Defendants, especially those of color, trembled when assigned to his courtroom, knowing his reputation for maximum sentences and minimal patience. Harrison took his seat at the bench, adjusting his robes with practiced authority, before looking down at the case file through reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He barely acknowledged Marcus Johnson standing beside his public defender, a young, overworked attorney named David Cohen, who was already shuffling papers nervously. Selena sat directly behind the defense table, her posture perfect, eyes forward, taking in every detail of the proceedings. Case number 87654. State versus Marcus Johnson, charges of possession of controlled substances on school property, the court clerk announced. District Attorney Catherine Brennan rose confidently, her crimson blazer a splash of color in the otherwise drab courtroom. At 44, Brennan had built her career on being tough on crime, a stance that had won her 3 consecutive terms and whispers of a future gubernatorial run. Your Honor, the state has clear evidence that the defendant was in possession of 28 grams of cocaine while operating as director of East Baltimore Community Center, which conducts youth programs and is therefore classified as an educational facility under state law. Brennan presented the case with rehearsed precision, pointing to surveillance footage supposedly showing Marcus accepting a package containing drugs. Even from where Selena sat, she could tell the footage had been edited, the timestamp jumping suspiciously in several places. The alleged drugs themselves were presented in evidence bags, but Selena noted the chain of custody documentation was incomplete. When David Cohen rose to present the defense, Judge Harrison immediately began his subtle dismantling. "Mr. Cohen, I hope you've prepared something substantive today. My courtroom isn't a training ground for the public defender's office." Cohen flushed red but soldiered on. "Your Honor, Mr. Johnson has no prior record. He's been a pillar of the East Baltimore community for 15 years. The alleged drugs were found during an unscheduled inspection that violated procedural guidelines, and Mr. Johnson was not present when they were discovered." Judge Harrison cut him off mid-sentence. "Mr. Cohen, are you suggesting our police officers planted evidence? That's a serious accusation." "No, Your Honor, I'm simply stating that proper procedures weren't followed and the chain of custody is unclear." Harrison waved dismissively. "Continue with something more substantive." Cohen called Marcus to testify, but Harrison interrupted repeatedly, dismissing key points and sustaining nearly every objection from the prosecution. When it came time for character witnesses, Cohen called Selena first. "Please state your name and relationship to the defendant," Cohen requested. "Selena Monroe. I've known Marcus Johnson for 30 years. We grew up together in Southside Baltimore." Before she could continue, D.A., Brennan interjected, "Your Honor, what relevance does a childhood friend have? This isn't a family reunion." Judge Harrison nodded. "Miss St. Monroe, unless you have relevant information about the alleged crime, character testimony won't sway this court." Selena maintained her composure. "Your Honor, if I may, Maryland precedent under State v. 6 and 7. Williams established that character witnesses with long-standing relationships are permissible when establishing pattern of behavior contradictory to alleged offenses." Harrison's eyes narrowed at her legal knowledge. "Are you an attorney, Miss Monroe?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And where do you practice?" "I serve as legal counsel within the federal government." Selena kept her answer deliberately vague, noticing D.A. Brennan, suddenly paying closer attention. "Well, Miss Monroe, this is my courtroom, not a federal agency. I determine what's relevant here." Harrison's tone grew dismissive. "Now, do you have first-hand knowledge regarding the alleged substances found in the defendant's office?" "I have knowledge of Marcus Johnson's character that directly contradicts the prosecution's narrative, and I'm familiar with several procedural irregularities in the case file that warrant further examination." Selena maintained direct eye contact with the judge. Harrison's face flushed slightly. "Miss Monroe, this court doesn't need a lecture on procedure from an outsider. Please limit your responses to the questions asked." Selena noticed D.A. Brennan smirking at the judge's dismissal. She also spotted a court reporter slightly raising her eyebrows at the judge's tone. "Your Honor," Selena continued, "I would like to note for the record that the surveillance footage presented shows clear signs of editing at timestamps 1422 and 1429. Additionally, the evidence log fails to establish proper chain of custody as required under Maryland Criminal Procedure Code, Section 7-106. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Harrison's knuckles whitened around his gavel. "Miss Monroe, you are here as a character witness, not as counsel for the defense. One more attempt to usurp proper procedure in my courtroom, and you'll be removed." D.A. Brennan stood. "Your Honor, I move that this witness's testimony be stricken from the record, as she's clearly attempting to act as unauthorized counsel." Selena remained calm. "I'm simply stating facts relevant to my friend's case, facts that speak to the likelihood of his involvement in the alleged crime. That's enough." Harrison slammed his gavel down. "Bailiff, remove Miss Monroe from my courtroom immediately for contempt and obstruction of proceedings." As the bailiff approached, Selena stood slowly straightening her jacket. "Your Honor, before you have me removed, you should be aware that my position as legal counsel within the federal government is specifically as chief legal counsel to the Central Intelligence Agency." She carefully slid her credentials across the bench, making sure the court reporter and others nearby could see the official CIA insignia. "And I believe what's happening in this courtroom today warrants significant federal scrutiny." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Judge Harrison's face drained of color. The bailiff froze mid-step, looking uncertainly between Selena and the judge. D.A. Brennan's smirk vanished, replaced by a calculated neutrality. Judge Harrison stared at the credentials, then at Selena, his authority suddenly on shaky ground. "This court will take a 30-minute recess," he announced abruptly, slamming his gavel down again before practically fleeing the bench. Judge Harrison's chambers reflected his inflated sense of self-importance with dark mahogany furniture law books, perfectly aligned on built-in shelves and framed photographs, showing him alongside various political figures. Selena sat opposite his massive desk, her CIA credentials now tucked back inside her purse, her expression revealing nothing as the judge paced nervously before finally taking his seat. "Miss Monroe, I think we've had a serious misunderstanding," Harrison began, his previous authoritarian tone replaced with an almost ingratiating politeness. "Had I known about your position, this situation would have been handled quite differently." Selena remained silent, watching him squirm under her steady gaze. Was this how he treated all black professionals, she wondered? Or was his rapid change in demeanor specific to her government position? Judge Harrison, misunderstandings occur when information is withheld or miscommunicated. What happened in your courtroom was neither. It was a deliberate pattern of behavior. Her voice remained professional, betraying none of the anger simmering beneath. Harrison's smile tightened. "Miss Monroe, with all due respect, you were overstepping your role as a character witness. Surely you understand courtroom protocol." "I understand protocol perfectly, Judge Harrison. I also understand selective enforcement when I see it. The case against Marcus Johnson shows multiple procedural violations that you deliberately ignored." She paused, noting how his eyes darted to a particular file cabinet before returning to her. "I'm curious why a community center director with no criminal record suddenly becomes a high-priority drug case in your courtroom." Harrison leaned back, attempting to project confidence. "The proximity to schools makes any drug offense serious, as I'm sure you're aware. But given your position, I'm willing to reconsider the case entirely. In fact, I could dismiss the charges today if that would resolve this unfortunate situation." The sudden reversal confirmed everything Selena suspected. Before she could respond, Harrison's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, then at Selena. "Excuse me, I need to take this," he answered, turning slightly away, but not enough that Selena couldn't hear his side of the conversation. "Yes, Senator. No, I'm handling it. She's here now." "Yes, I understand the implications." Selena used the opportunity to scan the office more thoroughly. On the credenza behind Harrison sat several photographs, including one of him shaking hands with Senator Maxwell Stone at what appeared to be a private fundraiser. Stone's reputation for supporting policies that disproportionately harmed minority communities was well documented. On Harrison's desk, partially covered by other files, she spotted a folder labeled Strategic Case Management, with several case numbers listed. One file was labeled CR 47392 Thomas v. State, which she committed to memory. Harrison ended his call and turned back to Selena with a thin smile. "Senator Stone sends his regards. He's a great supporter of our judicial system." The implied connection wasn't subtle. "How fortunate to have such interested oversight," Selena replied neutrally. "Judge Harrison, you mentioned dismissing the charges against Marcus Johnson. I'm curious what changed between the courtroom and your chambers to warrant such a reversal." Harrison's smile faltered. "Sometimes cases benefit from a more thorough review. I'm simply suggesting that given the circumstances, this particular case might not be worth the court's continued attention. Or perhaps not worth the scrutiny its procedural irregularities might attract," Selena countered. Harrison's expression hardened. "Miss Monroe, while I respect your position at the CIA, I would caution you about overextending your authority. National security and local criminal matters are separate jurisdictions. There could be broader implications if those lines blur inappropriately." The threat was clear. Selena stood smoothing her jacket. "Thank you for your time, Judge Harrison. I'll be returning for the continuation of Marcus Johnson's case this afternoon. I believe transparency serves justice best, don't you?" She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Oh, and Judge, those jurisdictional lines you mentioned work both ways. The CIA takes a keen interest in domestic threats to constitutional rights when they intersect with our personnel's ability to perform their duties without harassment or discrimination." She left him staring after her. The power dynamic irrevocably shifted. In the hallway, a young woman in a court clerk's uniform approached Selena cautiously. "Miss Monroe, I'm Jennifer Lawson, Judge Harrison's clerk." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I saw what happened in there. You should know they've done this before." She glanced around nervously before pressing a small folded note into Selena's hand. "Check case number CR 47392. Ask for Diane Thomas." Before Selena could respond, Jennifer hurried away, disappearing around a corner as a security guard approached. "Do you think Judge Harrison's immediate change in behavior reveals his true character?" Comment number 1. If you believe powerful racists only respect other forms of power. Or comment number 2, if you think his reversal was purely strategic. What would you do if you were in Selena's position with both the power of the CIA behind you and the responsibility to use it ethically? Like this video if you're curious about what Selena will discover next, and subscribe to Placed Nudo Levum. Follow this journey of justice. Now, what secrets might be hiding in case number CR 47392, and who is Diane Thomas? Could this be the key to understanding a larger pattern of discrimination in Harrison's courtroom? Selena found a quiet corner in the courthouse cafeteria, placing her secure phone on the table as she dialed a familiar number. "Richards, I need you to assemble the team in the secure conference room." She spoke quietly, keeping her eyes on the entrance. Thomas Richards had been her right hand at the CIA legal department for 5 years, a brilliant analyst with a background in civil rights law. "Everyone's in place, Director Monroe." Encrypted line established. Richards was always 2 steps ahead, one of the reasons Selena had personally recruited him from the Justice Department. "I need background on Judge Everett Harrison, Baltimore Circuit Court. Focus on case history's sentencing patterns by demographic, political connections, and financial records. Priority flag on case number CR 4739 to Defendant Diane Thomas. Selena could hear Richards typing rapidly. Also run background on District Attorney Catherine Brennan and any connections to Senator Maxwell Stone. On it. Initial search parameters suggest some concerning patterns already. Harrison's sentencing shows significant statistical anomalies along racial lines. Marcus Chen is pulling the full dataset now. Marcus Chen was their statistical analyst capable of finding patterns others missed. Good. I also need an expert on video forensics. The surveillance footage in Marcus Johnson's case shows signs of manipulation. Zoe Rodriguez is available. She just finished the Belgrade analysis. Perfect. I'll need complete discretion on this, Richards. This is personal, not official CIA business, but intersects. But it intersects with potential civil rights violations that could impact national security personnel. I understand the boundaries, Director. This was why Selena valued Richards so highly. He understood the delicate balance between their official duties and the moral imperatives that sometimes stretched those boundaries. I'll have preliminary findings within the hour. Selena ended the call and made her way to the detention center where Marcus was being held. The processing officer initially denied her access until she presented her bar credentials, another small reminder of the systemic obstacles faced even by black professionals. The visiting room was sparse and cold, the kind of institutional design meant to dehumanize everyone inside it. When Marcus entered, Selena was struck by how tired he looked. His normally confident posture diminished by orange prison scrubs and 3 weeks in detention. Selena, he embraced her briefly before they both sat. I heard what happened in court today. You didn't have to reveal your position for me. I revealed exactly what was necessary, she replied. Marcus, this case is riddled with procedural violations. The surveillance footage has been tampered with the chain of custody, the evidence is broken, and Judge Harrison's bias is clearly documented in his case history. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. This isn't just about me, Selena. The community center was making real progress. Our voter registration drive had signed up over 3,000 new voters in districts that historically had low turnout. We were organizing transportation programs for Election Day. Then suddenly there's an anonymous tip about drugs, and here I am. The political implications clicked into place for Selena. She thought back to a CIA operation 3 years earlier in Eastern Europe, where local officials had manufactured criminal charges against opposition leaders before elections. She had navigated the legal complexities of that situation while maintaining the agency's ethical boundaries, and those same skills would serve her now. I'm going to get you out of here, Marcus. But I need to know everything about who might have wanted to target you or the center. As Marcus detailed the center's activities and recent interactions with local officials, Selena's secure phone vibrated. A message from Richards contained a preliminary report on Judge Harrison, 28% higher sentences for black defendants than white defendants for identical charges, significant campaign contributions from companies owned by Flive, Senator Stone's family, and 3 complaints of judicial misconduct that had mysteriously disappeared from official records. Another message contained information on case CR 47392. Diane Thomas had been a black hospital administrator charged with prescription fraud 2 years earlier. Despite compelling evidence of her innocence, Judge Harrison had denied key defense motions, resulting in her conviction and the loss of her medical license. The familiar pattern made Selena's jaw tighten. After leaving Marcus with promises to return, Selena called Zoe Rodriguez, the CIA's top expert in video forensics. Director Monroe, I've reviewed the footage. It's definitely been altered. Frames removed at specific points, time codes manipulated. It's professional work, but they didn't expect CIA-level scrutiny. Can you reconstruct what was removed? Already done. The original likely showed someone else entering the office and placing the package. I can see shadow movements that don't match the individual they're claiming is Johnson. I need a full report, Zoe. Documented, certified, court admissible. You'll have it within 2 hours. Selena was heading back to her car when her phone rang from an unlisted number. Monroe, she answered cautiously. "You should stay in your lane, Miss CIA lawyer." The voice was distorted, unidentifiable. "Baltimore courts aren't your jurisdiction. Some lines once crossed can't be uncrossed." The call ended abruptly. Selena immediately contacted her security team, implementing standard protocols for threats against CIA personnel, though she suspected this was meant more to intimidate than as a genuine threat to her safety. When she arrived at her hotel room that evening, she knew immediately someone had been there. Nothing was obviously disturbed, but small signs were evident to her trained eye. The laptop slightly repositioned, the bathroom towels refolded differently than the hotel's standard pattern, the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne. A quick sweep revealed no listening devices, but the message was clear: she was being watched. That night, Selena connected the dots between the various pieces of information her team had gathered. This wasn't simply about a racist judge. The pattern suggested a coordinated system targeting specific types of community leaders, particularly those increasing minority civic engagement. Judge Harrison was just one piece of a larger machinery of suppression, and Selena was now determined to dismantle it piece by piece, starting with freeing Marcus and then working her way up to whoever was orchestrating the entire operation. The CIA's secure conference room hummed with focused energy as Selena connected remotely through an encrypted video link. On screen, her team had transformed the space into an operational center, multiple displays showing timelines, connection maps, and data analyses. Thomas Richards stood at the center, directing the briefing with practiced efficiency. "Director Monroe, we've compiled comprehensive data on 17 cases before Judge Harrison over the past 3 years that match the pattern we're seeing with Marcus Johnson. All defendants were educated. Black professionals, all were involved in community organization or voter engagement. All faced charges with minimal or fabricated evidence, and all received maximum sentences." Marcus Chen stepped forward, adjusting his glasses as he highlighted a geographical display. "The statistical anomalies are beyond coincidental. When we map the locations of the defendants' activities against voting district boundaries, a pattern emerges. The map illuminated showing concentrations around specific district lines. These are all areas where changing demographics could potentially shift voting outcomes in upcoming elections. The community center Mr. Plast, 1.com7- Johnson Run sits at the intersection of 3 districts that were decided by fewer than 500 votes in the last cycle. Selena processed this information, the political motivation becoming clearer. And the connection to Senator Stone Zoe Rodriguez brought up financial records on another screen. Senator Stone chairs the Judiciary Appointment Committee that fast-tracked Harrison's appointment 5 years ago. Stone's family foundation, Eastern Harbor Development Corporation, has donated substantial amounts to D.A. Brennan's campaigns. The foundation also purchased 4 properties that were previously community centers or gathering spaces in predominantly black neighborhoods, after the directors of those spaces were convicted of various charges in Harrison's precinct's courtroom. The pattern was undeniable. Harrison, Brennan, and Stone were systematically targeting educated black professionals who were mobilizing voter participation using trumped-up criminal charges to remove them from their communities and then literally taking over the physical spaces where organization occurred. We've also analyzed voter registration records before and after these cases, Marcus continued. In each affected district, there was a significant drop in new voter registrations following the removal of these community leaders. The estimated impact was sufficient to maintain current power structures in at least 3 districts that would otherwise likely have flipped in the last election. Selena felt a cold anger building as the full scope of the conspiracy emerged. This wasn't just about Marcus or individual cases of discrimination. It was a calculated strategy to suppress votes and maintain political control through weaponized prosecution. "What about similar patterns in neighboring jurisdictions?" she asked. Richards nodded grimly. "We're seeing comparable statistical anomalies in 2 adjacent counties, both with judges who were appointed through Senator Stone's committee. We're still gathering data, but preliminary analysis suggests a coordinated regional strategy." Selena's secure phone buzzed with a message from CIA Director Phillips. "Monroe need to speak with you immediately." Excusing herself from the conference, she called the director from a private room. Director Phillips, I apologize for the unusual resource allocation. I can explain. Selena Phillips's voice was measured but concerned. I've received a call from Senator Stone's office expressing concerns about CIA resources being used for what he called a personal vendetta in Baltimore. He specifically mentioned you by name. Selena wasn't surprised that Stone had already been alerted. Director, what began as a personal matter has uncovered what appears to be a systematic civil rights violation targeting black community leaders to manipulate electoral outcomes. This intersects with national security concerns about domestic voter suppression tactics. There was a long pause before Phillips responded. Selena, you're walking a very fine line here. The CIA is prohibited from domestic operations. You know that better than anyone. I'm acting as a private citizen and licensed attorney in supporting my friend's defense. The analysis being conducted relates to patterns that could constitute federal civil rights violations that the FBI would have jurisdiction over. Another pause. The FBI has apparently begun their own investigation into judicial corruption in Baltimore. Agent Jordan Taylor has been cleared to share information with you, given your security clearance, but Selena Phillips's voice turned warning. This cannot appear to be a CIA operation. Stone has significant influence on our Appropriations Committee. Understood, Director. I'll coordinate with the FBI appropriately and ensure all boundaries are respected. After ending the call, Selena contacted FBI Special Agent Jordan Taylor, whom she had worked with on several interagency task forces. Their initial conversation was cautious, with Taylor clearly concerned about jurisdictional overreach, but after reviewing the data Selena's team had compiled, his professional demeanor shifted to one of focused determination. We've been building a case against Harrison for 8 months, Taylor admitted. But we didn't have the connection to Stone, or the pattern with community centers and voter registration. This adds a significant civil rights dimension. What about federal prosecutor Alexander Montgomery? Selena asked, recalling that Montgomery had jurisdiction over federal cases in the district. Taylor's expression darkened. That's a complication. Montgomery and Stone have known each other since law school. We've had several cases involving judicial misconduct mysteriously reassigned when they landed on Montgomery's desk. This explained why previous complaints against Harrison had disappeared. The conspiracy reached into the federal prosecutor's office, creating a nearly perfect system of protection. If local cases became problematic, they could be elevated to federal jurisdiction, where Montgomery would ensure they disappeared. And if federal investigations began, Stone's political influence could redirect or defund them. It was elegant in its corruption, a self-protecting system designed to appear as normal judicial process while systematically undermining democratic participation in specific communities. As Selena ended her call with Taylor, she understood that taking down this system would require extraordinary care. One misstep could not only fail to free Marcus, but could potentially compromise both her CIA position and the FBI's broader investigation. The conspiracy had power, political connections, and a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. But now Selena had something they didn't expect: irrefutable evidence of their pattern, and the combined resources of determined allies within multiple agencies. The question was no longer whether she could expose the conspiracy, but how to do it in a way that would ensure justice without being undermined by the very power structures they were challenging. Selena's phone rang at 11:30 that night, her younger sister Kiana's voice tight with controlled fear. "Selena, I just got pulled over for no reason. The officer kept asking if I was related to you, saying he knew my sister was causing trouble in Baltimore. He made me step out of the car, searched everything, then suddenly got a call and let me go with a warning. Selena, he never even told me what I supposedly did wrong." Kiana, a pediatric resident at Johns Hopkins, had never had so much as a parking ticket. The targeting of her family confirmed the escalation Selena had anticipated. "Kiana, I want you to stay with Aunt Loretta for a few days. Don't tell anyone where you're going, not even coworkers. I'll explain everything soon." "Selena, what have you gotten involved in?" The concern in her sister's voice was palpable. "Something important. Something necessary. I'll make sure you're protected." After ensuring Kiana had secure transportation to their aunt's house in Pennsylvania, Selena checked the local news sites. The Baltimore Herald's website featured a new article, Community Center Director's Criminal History Questioned. The piece cited anonymous sources, claiming Marcus had previous drug charges that had been expunged, a complete fabrication designed to undermine his reputation before trial resumed. Selena immediately contacted Richards. They're escalating their media strategy. We need to prepare countermeasures. Already on it. We've identified the reporter, Vincent Walsh. He has connections to Senator Stone's former press secretary and has published hit pieces on 3 other defendants from our case pattern. The next morning, Selena received an urgent message from Jennifer Lawson, Judge Harrison's clerk, who had slipped her the note about Diane Thomas. Meeting in parking garage level 2, east corner, 15 minutes. The location raised security concerns, but Selena's instincts told her this was important. She took appropriate precautions, having Richards monitor remotely and positioning herself with clear sightlines and exit routes. Jennifer appeared clutching a manila envelope, her eyes darting nervously around the concrete structure. "Miss Monroe, I found more files. Cases with the same pattern. Judge Harrison keeps them separate from the main system." She handed over the envelope. "I can't be seen talking to you again. They're watching everyone now." Before Selena could ask who they were, Jennifer turned to leave, then added, "Be careful." The last clerk who asked questions had an accident on the courthouse steps. Later that day, Selena learned that Jennifer had been found in the courthouse bathroom with a broken wrist and bruised ribs, allegedly from falling downstairs. The message couldn't have been clearer. When Selena logged into the CIA secure system that afternoon, she received a notification that her security clearance was under routine review, temporarily limiting her access to certain databases. The timing was suspicious, suggesting Stone was using his political connections to hamper her investigation. Meanwhile, Senator Stone held an impromptu press conference on the steps of the federal courthouse. Recent allegations of judicial impropriety in Baltimore represent a troubling overreach by federal agencies into local matters. We cannot allow Washington bureaucrats to intimidate our respected judiciary with baseless investigations. Though he mentioned no names, the target of his statement was obvious. When Selena returned to her hotel that evening, she found herself facing internal pressure as well. A message from several risk-averse colleagues at CIA headquarters suggested she should consider recusal from personal matters that might create appearance of conflict. Translating from bureaucratic caution, they were feeling the political heat from Stone and wanted her to back off. The escalation turned physical that night. Selena returned from a late meeting with FBI agent Taylor to find her hotel room door slightly ajar. Drawing her personal firearm, she conducted a careful entry, clearing the space professionally, before discovering the vandalism. Spray painted across the mirror were the words, "Know your place," alongside a racial slur. Nothing appeared to be stolen, confirming this was intimidation, not theft. Selena photographed everything before calling hotel security, knowing the local police might be compromised. While waiting for security, she received an unexpected call from a number she didn't recognize. "Miss Monroe, this is Judge Rebecca Collins, Ninth Circuit Court." Collins was a respected jurist known for her strict adherence to procedural law. "We haven't met, but I've followed your career with interest. I believe we share concerns about certain patterns in Judge Harrison's courtroom." Selena proceeded cautiously. "I appreciate your call, Judge Collins. May I ask what prompted it? I've been keeping my own records of concerning judicial conduct. When Jennifer Lawson was injured today, after speaking with you, I decided it was time to share what I know." Judge Collins explained that she had documented Harrison's private meetings with D.A. Brennan and other parties immediately before specific high-profile cases, a clear ethical violation. "I also have records of several meetings between Harrison Brennan and federal prosecutor Alexander Montgomery in Senator Stone's private office. One such meeting occurred the day before evidence in your friend Marcus Johnson's case was allegedly discovered. This confirmed what Selena had suspected: Montgomery was directly involved in fabricating evidence. The conspiracy extended from local courts all the way to the federal prosecutor's office. Judge Collins, would you be willing to provide these records to the appropriate federal investigators? That's why I'm calling Miss Monroe. This corruption threatens the integrity of our entire judicial system. I've dedicated my life to the law, and I cannot remain silent while it's perverted for political purposes." With Judge Collins's evidence, Selena now had confirmation of Montgomery's involvement, completing the circle of corruption. As she ended the call, Selena realized the vandalism in her room had achieved the opposite of its intended effect. Rather than intimidating her, it had revealed their desperation. Her investigation was clearly getting too close to the truth, and the conspiracy was reacting with increasingly reckless moves. The next morning brought news that further confirmed the conspiracy's next target. Richards discovered that a major civil rights case challenging voter identification requirements was scheduled to appear before Judge Harrison the following month. If Harrison ruled against the plaintiffs, as seemed likely given his pattern, it would set a precedent affecting voting access throughout the region, potentially impacting tens of thousands of votes in upcoming elections. The systematic suppression of black community leaders had been just the first phase. The larger strategy aimed to institutionalize voter suppression through judicial precedent. Do you believe corruption in our justice system is usually isolated to a few bad actors or part of larger systemic problems? Comment number 1, if you think corrupt individuals act alone, or comment number 2, if you believe they're usually protected by networks of power. Have you ever witnessed discrimination that seemed to follow a pattern rather than being random incidents like this video? If you're wondering how Selena will fight back against this escalating threat, and subscribe to see how she'll protect herself and her sister while exposing this corruption. What strategy would you use to counter a conspiracy reaching this high into government without endangering yourself or your loved ones? Selena sat in the corner booth of a nondescript coffee shop 5 blocks from the courthouse, across from Vanessa Rodriguez, an investigative journalist whose reputation for integrity and fearlessness had earned her both awards and enemies. Everything I'm about to tell you can be independently verified. Selena began sliding a USB drive across the table. Statistical analysis of sentencing disparities, evidence of tampered surveillance footage, documented meetings between judicial officials and political figures outside proper channels, and financial connections linking all parties involved. Rodriguez examined the drive cautiously. "You're taking a significant risk bringing this to me. Why not go through official channels?" "Because the official channels are compromised. Federal prosecutor Alexander Montgomery has buried previous complaints. Senator Stone has political influence over multiple agencies. This needs to enter the public domain through a trusted source before the official mechanisms can function properly." The journalist nodded slowly. "A circuit breaker strategy. Public disclosure forces official action that would otherwise be suppressed." "Exactly. But the reporting needs to focus on the pattern and statistical evidence rather than any single case. This isn't about Marcus Johnson or even Judge Harrison alone. It's about a systematic effort to undermine democratic participation in specific communities." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed with professional interest. "A voting rights story disguised as judicial corruption. That's front-page material, with one condition: no publication until I give the signal. There are parallel investigations that need to be synchronized for maximum effect." After securing Rodriguez's agreement, Selena implemented the next phase of her strategy, meeting with FBI agent Taylor in a secure location to coordinate their parallel investigations. "The Bureau has jurisdiction over civil rights violations and electoral interference," Taylor explained, spreading case files across the table. "But we've been hamstrung by Montgomery's office, blocking our access to local evidence. Which is why we need to approach this from multiple angles simultaneously," Selena replied. "My team has secured independent verification of evidence tampering in multiple cases. Judge Collins has provided documentation of improper meetings. And we have statistical evidence demonstrating the pattern targeting specific communities." Taylor nodded appreciatively, a classic pincer movement. While Montgomery can block a single investigation route, multiple simultaneous approaches from different jurisdictions creates too many fronts to contain. They developed a coordinated strategy. The FBI would focus on civil rights violations and electoral interference, while Selena's legal approach would target judicial misconduct and evidence tampering. Meanwhile, Rodriguez's reporting would create the public pressure necessary to prevent political interference once the operation began. Selena then turned her attention to witness protection, knowing that Jennifer Lawson and others would face retaliation once the conspiracy was exposed. Using CIA resources with Director Phillips's careful approval, she arranged secure communication channels and temporary relocation options for key witnesses. This falls within counterintelligence protection of sources providing information on domestic threats. Phillips had reluctantly agreed, adding, "But Selena, this walks the very edge of our mandate. Don't step over it." As Selena anticipated, Judge Harrison and DA Brennan realized an investigation was underway and began destroying evidence. Her team monitored increased activity at both the courthouse and DA's office during overnight hours, with numerous files being removed. However, Selena had already secured copies of critical documents through Judge Collins and Jennifer Lawson, anticipating this exact response. The destruction of evidence would now only add obstruction of justice to their charges. Senator Stone, recognizing the growing threat, escalated his political counterattack. Director Phillips called Selena during an operational meeting. "Senator Stone just left my office. He's threatening budget cuts to our entire Eastern European division if, and I quote, certain CIA personnel don't cease their unauthorized activities in Baltimore. He's becoming desperate," Selena observed. "Good. Desperate people make mistakes. Selena, he specifically mentioned your security clearance review. He's trying to sideline you before whatever you're building comes to fruition. Which means we're close enough that he's genuinely worried." Director I. "Need 48 more hours. Then everything goes through official channels with the FBI taking the public lead. The CIA's involvement will be appropriately minimized." Phillips sighed heavily. 48 hours, Selena. Then this becomes an FBI operation with you acting solely as a cooperating witness and private attorney. Understood? Perfectly, Director. The following day, DA Brennan made an unexpected move, requesting a private meeting with Selena at a restaurant across town. The location had been swept for surveillance, confirming Selena's suspicion that Brennan wanted a conversation off the record. "Miss Monroe," Brennan began, once they were seated, her trademark crimson suit replaced by subdued navy. "I think we may have mutual interests worth discussing." "I'm listening," Selena replied neutrally. "Judge Harrison has become a liability. His methods are increasingly erratic, his biases too obvious. Senator Stone is concerned about potential blowback." Brennan's attempt to distance herself from her co-conspirators was transparent. "And you're offering a deal. The Johnson case dismissed, all charges dropped. In exchange, your investigation focuses solely on Judge Harrison. Everyone else walks away clean." When Selena didn't immediately respond, Brennan added with calculated menace, "I should mention that in my position, I've become aware of certain CIA operations in Ecuador last year that would raise serious questions about jurisdiction and methods if they became public. The threat to expose classified operations was explicit." Selena smiled thinly. "D.A. Brennan, let me be absolutely clear. You're currently attempting to blackmail a federal official with classified information you shouldn't have access to, which is itself a federal crime. Additionally, your involvement in fabricating evidence, obstructing justice, and civil rights violations is thoroughly documented. So no, there will be no deal." Brennan's composure cracked momentarily. "You don't understand who you're dealing with. Stone has connections throughout Washington. Your career will be over before this reaches a courtroom." Perhaps Selena conceded, "but Marcus Johnson will be free, and the system you've helped build will be dismantled. That's a trade I'm willing to make." As Brennan stormed out, Selena contacted Richards. "They're turning on each other. Brennan just tried to sacrifice Harrison to save herself. Accelerate the timeline. We move tomorrow." Throughout the night, Selena's team finalized preparations. Every piece of evidence was duplicated and secured in multiple locations. Witnesses were positioned with protection. FBI teams were briefed and ready. and Vanessa Rodriguez had her exposé prepared for publication the moment the operation began. Selena got exactly 2 hours of sleep before dawn broke on what would become the most significant day of her career. She dressed carefully in her most professional attire, a charcoal gray suit that projected authority without ostentation. As she prepared to leave for the courthouse, she paused to call Marcus. "It happens today," she told him simply. "Whatever occurs in that courtroom, remember that the truth doesn't always emerge in a straight line. Trust the process we've built." "I've trusted you since we were 8 years old, Selena," he replied. "That's not going to change now." With that vote of confidence, Selena Monroe stepped into the morning sunlight, ready to dismantle a conspiracy that had damaged countless lives and undermined the very foundations of justice in Baltimore. The Baltimore City Courthouse buzzed with unusual energy that morning. News vans lined the street, reporters clustered on the steps, and the security line stretched around the block. Selena's arrival caused a ripple of whispers as she walked confidently through the main entrance, no longer attempting to maintain a low profile. Courtroom 3B was packed beyond capacity, with spectators spilling into the hallway. Judge Harrison entered with visible agitation, his normally imperious demeanor undermined by darting eyes and a slight tremor in his hands. He noticed the unusually large media presence and the 3 unfamiliar men in suits sitting directly behind the prosecutor's table, their federal badges partially visible. "This court is now in session," the bailiff announced, his voice slightly uncertain as he surveyed the crowded room. "Continuing case number 8-7654, State versus Marcus Johnson." Judge Harrison cleared his throat. "Before we proceed, given certain sensitive aspects of this case, I'm ordering the courtroom closed to media and spectators. Bailiff, please clear all non-essential personnel." Selena rose immediately. "Your Honor, I must object to closing these proceedings. Under Maryland Rules of Procedure 416 and the First Amendment, court proceedings are presumptively open to the public absent specific articulable findings that closure is essential." Harrison's face flushed. "Miss Eva Monroe, as I've previously stated, your role here is limited to that of character witness, not defense counsel." "Actually, Your Honor," David Cohen interjected with newfound confidence, "Miss Monroe has now been formally added to Mr. Johnson's defense team." The paperwork was filed this morning. He slid the documents forward. Harrison examined them with growing alarm. "This is highly irregular. I'm concerned about potential conflicts of interest given Ms. Sayas prove Monroe's federal position. The CIA Ethics Office has reviewed and cleared my participation." "Your Honor," Selena responded smoothly. "There are no conflicts preventing me from assisting in this case. And regarding your motion to close the courtroom, the defense requests the specific security concern be articulated for the record." Harrison's jaw tightened. "National security concerns that I'm not at liberty to detail. Without specific articulation, the motion to close must be denied, Your Honor. The Supreme Court has been quite clear on this point in cases from Richmond Newspapers versus Virginia through Press Enterprise." Before Harrison could respond, the courtroom doors opened, and FBI Agent Taylor entered, accompanied by 4 additional agents. "Your Honor," Taylor announced, approaching the bench and displaying his credentials. "I'm Special Agent Jordan Taylor with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have federal warrants relating to matters before this court." Harrison stared at the warrants with visible shock. "This is my courtroom, Agent Taylor. You have no jurisdiction to interrupt these proceedings. With respect, Your Honor, federal civil rights violations and conspiracy against rights under Title 18 U.S. Code Section 241 supersede local jurisdiction. These warrants have been approved by Federal Judge Eliza Washington of the District Court." D.A. Brennan rose quickly. "Your Honor, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Marcus Johnson in the interest of justice." The sudden reversal drew gasps from the spectators. Harrison appeared momentarily relieved at the potential escape route. "Motion granted. Case dismissed. Court adjourned." He banged his gavel and stood to leave. "Your Honor." Selena called out, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "while the state's case has been dismissed. There are several motions before the court that require resolution, including our motion for sanctions regarding the fabricated evidence. and our motion to unseal the related cases identified in our filing." Harrison froze, then slowly retook his seat. "Those motions are rendered moot by the dismissal." "That's incorrect, Your Honor. The dismissal of criminal charges does not eliminate the court's responsibility to address documented misconduct, particularly when it forms part of a pattern affecting multiple defendants." Selena approached the bench, placing a thick binder before him. "This contains statistical analysis demonstrating that in your courtroom, black defendants receive sentences averaging 28% longer than white defendants for identical charges. It also contains forensic evidence proving the surveillance footage in Mr. Johnson's case was deliberately altered by the prosecution." D.A. Brennan stood abruptly. "Your Honor, the state objects to these unfounded accusations." Unfounded. Selena raised an eyebrow, turning to face the packed courtroom. "I call Zoe Rodriguez, certified forensic video analyst." Zoe approached the witness stand, carrying her own documentation. Over the next 30 minutes, she methodically demonstrated how the surveillance footage had been edited, frames removed, and timestamps altered. Harrison repeatedly attempted to limit her testimony, but each time Selena countered with specific procedural rules until he eventually fell silent. Next came Marcus Chen with his statistical analysis, followed by Jennifer Lawson, who despite visible anxiety testified about the separate filing system Harrison maintained for cases involving black community leaders. As the evidence mounted, Judge Harrison's demeanor shifted from defensive to defeated. During a brief recess, FBI agents could be seen leading D.A. Brennan into a private room for questioning. When court resumed, Brennan returned with her attorney, her expression grim. "Your Honor," she announced, "the state wishes to acknowledge serious procedural irregularities in this and several related cases. I am prepared to provide a complete accounting of these matters to federal investigators." The betrayal was obvious. Brennan was cutting a deal, offering Harrison as sacrifice to save herself. Harrison's face contorted with rage. "You duplicitous," he began before catching himself. "This court finds no basis for the defense's motions for sanctions." All motions denied. Court adjourned indefinitely. A distinguished older woman rose from the gallery. "Your Honor, I must intervene." Judge Rebecca Collins approached the bench, presenting her credentials to the clerk. "As senior judge of this circuit, I am exercising administrative authority under Maryland courts and judicial proceedings. Article 1-601 to temporarily suspend these proceedings, pending review by the Judicial Conduct Board." Harrison's authority was officially stripped away. As if choreographed, the courtroom doors opened again, revealing dozens of black men and women entering silently. Selena recognized many of them from the case files, previous defendants from Harrison's courtroom, community leaders who had been systematically targeted and convicted based on fabricated or exaggerated charges. Their presence created a powerful visual statement that this was not about a single case, but a pattern of injustice affecting an entire community. Diane Thomas, the hospital administrator, whose case Jennifer had first mentioned, stepped forward. "Judge Harrison, do you remember me? Case CR 47392. You sentenced me to 4 years for prescription fraud despite all evidence pointing to hospital computer error. My medical license was revoked. My career destroyed. I was one of the first, but clearly not the last." Others began to step forward, each stating their name and case number, creating a damning litany of injustice that filled the suddenly silent courtroom. Harrison's face grew ashen as the human cost of his actions became impossible to ignore. As FBI agents approached the bench with additional warrants, Selena stood beside Marcus, now officially a free man. "This is just the beginning," she told him quietly. "The system that targeted you extends beyond this courtroom, but today we've removed its judicial protection." Marcus squeezed her hand. "You kept our childhood promise. You protected me. We protected each other." Selena corrected him. "Your work registering voters threatened their power enough that they targeted you. That's the real victory here, and it's yours." Outside, the courthouse reporters swarmed as Judge Harrison was escorted out, not in handcuffs, but clearly under federal supervision. Vanessa Rodriguez's exposé was already publishing online, detailing the conspiracy from the courthouse to Senator Stone's office. The system that had seemed so impenetrable just days earlier was cracking open, exposed to the light of public scrutiny and federal investigation. Senator Stone issued a hasty press release, distancing himself from the unfortunate actions of local officials acting without my knowledge or approval, but the financial connections and meeting records detailed in Rodriguez's reporting told a different story. As the crowd dispersed, Agent Taylor approached Selena. "This is far from over. Montgomery is already working to contain the damage, and Stone has significant resources to insulate himself." "I know," Selena replied. "But containment is different from prevention. The pattern is exposed now, documented and public. Even if some escape full justice, the system itself has been compromised." Taylor nodded in acknowledgement. "The Bureau will take it from here as agreed. Your official involvement ends today." "My official involvement, yes." Selena smiled slightly. "But justice is a marathon, not a sprint." As Taylor walked away, Selena looked back at the courthouse where she had faced discrimination just days earlier. The building remained imposing, but its power to intimidate had diminished considerably. Systems built on injustice remained strong only while their operations stayed hidden. Exposure was the first step toward dismantling them, and today that step had been decisively taken. 3 months passed before the full impact of what reporters now called the Baltimore judiciary scandal became clear. Selena stood at the window of her Alexandria apartment, coffee in hand, watching the early morning news report. Former Judge Everett Harrison pleaded guilty today to multiple federal charges, including conspiracy against rights, obstruction of justice, and judicial misconduct. Under the plea agreement, Harrison will serve 5 years in federal prison and forfeit his judicial pension. Former District Attorney Catherine Brennan, who turned state's evidence in exchange for reduced charges, received 3 years probation and permanent disbarment. 7 other officials from the prosecutor's office also faced charges ranging from evidence tampering to perjury. The reporter continued. Senator Maxwell Stone, while implicated in Rodriguez's Pulitzer-nominated investigation, announced his resignation last week, citing health concerns, but has not been criminally charged. Sources suggest his significant political connections have shielded him from prosecution, despite substantial evidence of his orchestrating role in the conspiracy. Selena wasn't surprised. Power protected power, and Stone's connections reached into the highest levels of government. Still, his forced resignation represented a victory, albeit an incomplete one. The system couldn't protect him from public disgrace, even if it shielded him from legal consequences. Her secure phone rang, Marcus Johnson's name appearing on the screen. "Selena, have you seen the news? 23 cases overturned this morning, 23 lives restored." The Judicial Review Panel, established in the wake of the scandal, had been methodically examining every case where Harrison's bias might have influenced outcomes. One by one, convictions were being vacated, apologies issued, records expunged. "I saw," Selena replied. "How's the community center?" Marcus laughed, a sound of genuine joy that had been absent during his ordeal. "Thriving. The federal grant came through last week. We're expanding the voter education program to 3 more neighborhoods and adding a legal rights workshop. People are energized in a way I've never seen before." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The attempt to suppress community engagement had backfired dramatically, creating instead a wave of civic participation. Registration numbers were at record highs across the affected districts. Later that day, Selena met with CIA Director Phillips in her office overlooking the Potomac. "The judicial appointment offer came through again," Phillips noted, sliding a folder across her desk. "Federal Bench, Eastern District. They're quite persistent." Selena smiled but shook her head. "My work isn't finished here, Director." Phillips nodded, unsurprised. "I thought you might say that, which is why I've approved your proposal for the new Ethics and Oversight Division. You'll have full autonomy to develop protocols, ensuring our operations maintain legal and ethical boundaries, particularly where civil rights intersections occur." The new division represented everything Selena had worked toward throughout her career: the opportunity to create systemic protections against abuses of power, whether from prejudiced local judges or overzealous intelligence operations. Thank you, Director. I'll start assembling the team immediately. I assumed you would. Richards has already been reassigned to you, along with Chen and Rodriguez if you want them. Phillips leaned back, studying Selena thoughtfully. The Attorney General called this morning. The Baltimore case has prompted a nationwide review of judicial bias patterns. They're implementing new monitoring protocols based partly on the statistical model your team developed. It's being called the Monroe methodology. The validation of her approach was gratifying, but Selena knew that methodologies alone couldn't create justice. That required persistent human effort, constant vigilance against the natural tendency of power to protect itself. A week later, Selena and Marcus stood together at the dedication of the new Thomas Justice Scholarship named for Diane Thomas and funded jointly from their personal resources. The scholarship would support minority law students committed to civil rights work, creating a pipeline of dedicated attorneys to continue the fight for systemic reform. As Selena looked out at the gathered students, she recognized the mixture of idealism and uncertainty in their expressions. The law is often presented as an abstract system of rules applied equally to all, she began. But as many of you have experienced personally, its application is filtered through human biases, institutional practices, and power dynamics that can distort justice. Your challenge will be not just to master legal precedent, but to recognize and address these distortions. She paused, making eye contact with several students. Sometimes justice requires strategic silence, gathering evidence methodically before taking action. Other times it demands immediate vocal opposition to clear wrongs. Learning which approach serves justice in each situation will be among your greatest challenges. After the ceremony, Diane Thomas approached Selena. Now working as a healthcare policy advocate, she had transformed her personal injustice into a platform for systemic change. The scholarship is a beautiful tribute, she said. But I'm more impressed by what you're doing at the CIA. Changing systems from within takes extraordinary patience and skill, and external pressure, Selena added. The two approaches need each other. Internal reformers can only succeed when external advocates create the conditions that make change possible. This balance between internal reform and external pressure had become Selena's guiding philosophy. In her office, she had created a small mentoring program for young black female attorneys navigating government service. Their monthly sessions combined practical career advice with deeper discussions about maintaining ethical integrity while working within imperfect systems. During one such session, a young attorney named Zara Williams asked the question that had been lingering unspoken. After everything you exposed in Baltimore, do you believe the system can actually be reformed, or are the problems too deeply entrenched? Selena considered the question carefully. The Baltimore case revealed both the depth of corruption possible within our legal system and the potential for accountability when enough pressure is applied from multiple directions. Judge Harrison was removed, numerous convictions overturned, new oversight implemented. But Senator Stone largely escaped consequences, and similar systems operate nationwide. She leaned forward, her expression intense. So is the system reformable? Partially, incrementally, incompletely. But each reform creates space for the next one. Each exposed injustice makes the next one harder to conceal. The work continues not because complete success is guaranteed, but because partial success matters enormously to those it helps. She smiled at the circle of young women who represented the future of justice in America. And because silence in the face of injustice is never an option for those with the power to speak. What do you think is most important in fighting systemic discrimination, changing laws, changing attitudes, or changing who holds positions of power? How would you use your professional skills to address injustice if you witnessed it in your field? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you found Selena's strategic approach to confronting corruption inspiring, please like and subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes justice requires strategic silence before powerful action. Thank you for witnessing this journey with us, and remember, in the fight for equality, Your voice and your vote are powerful weapons that no corrupt system can withstand when used together. Silent Justice reveals powerful truths about confronting systemic racism in America's institutions. Selena Monroe's journey teaches us that fighting discrimination requires strategic patience and calculated action rather than immediate reaction. When facing entrenched racist systems, evidence collection and alliance building must precede confrontation. The story demonstrates how racism often operates through seemingly legitimate processes, court proceedings, evidence handling sentencing, creating plausible deniability while achieving discriminatory outcomes. Selena's success came from recognizing this pattern and attacking the system rather than individual incidents. We learn that accountability follows different rules at different power levels. Judge Harrison faced consequences, while Senator Stone largely escaped justice, showing how privilege and connections continue to shield the powerful. The story illustrates how racial discrimination intersects with voter suppression, revealing that attacks on Black community leaders often serve broader political agendas. Perhaps most importantly, we see that justice work requires both insider reformers and external pressure. Neither approach succeeds alone. Selena's CIA position provided resources and leverage, but community mobilization created the conditions making reform possible. The ultimate lesson is that fighting racism demands persistence through incomplete victories, recognizing that each small change creates space for the next, gradually bending the arc toward justice. What systems of inequality have you witnessed in your own community? Have you ever been in a position like Selena's where you had to choose between speaking out immediately or gathering evidence strategically? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story of courage against institutional racism resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that expose injustice and celebrate those fighting to dismantle discriminatory systems. How would you use your professional skills to address racism if you witnessed it in your workplace or community? Tag someone who stands up for justice like Selena and share this video with anyone who needs inspiration to keep fighting the good fight. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Selena's story. Remember, in the struggle against racism and corruption, your voice matters, sometimes in strategic silence, sometimes in powerful action, but always in service of a more just world.